So to finish out our segments on electronic acoustics, I wanted to walk you through another auditorium that had very different reasons for needing electronic acoustics, and those reasons were primarily lighting. So sometimes things interact in odd ways in performing arts. This particular school, which is Baldwinsville Central Schools, had a kind of a plain Jane auditorium, is what we would call this. Had poor lighting positions, the acoustics were not great, not really anything good about it. It was just an auditorium, high school auditorium. Some of the people in the district are very high up in USITT, which is the United States Institute of Theater Technology. Therefore, they kind of wanted a real auditorium. So, working with the architect, we started developing plans for, number one, how do we get really good lighting positions in this room? So the decision was made to take out this entire ceiling system and not put any ceilings back in, because we decided we wanted to provide for catwalks that give them fantastic lighting access. Not only the right positions, but side galleries down the side of the room, walkable, full height, don't have to bend over, not knocking your head into anything, and there's multiple catwalks in the room. The other thing that happened is extending the auditorium into some space that was previously some hallways, etc., and raking the seats up in the back, which helps with sight lines. But when all this was being done, we got into discussions with the music department. The music department is extensive. They have every kind of ensemble imaginable in this district, and they do 55 plus performances a year, and they use it for outside groups to come in and perform. So we had to accommodate orchestra, contemporary music, theatrical performances, brass ensembles, percussion ensembles, talent shows, rock and roll bands, all sorts of things, and each one of those requires its own specific acoustic environment if you want it to be really good. So we made the decision to do these catwalks, not use any ceilings, and to capture all of the acoustics required electronically. Now in this photo here, you can see a subwoofer right here in the middle. You can see some of these are full range loudspeakers for the electronic acoustic system. And I'm going to pull down here to, actually I'll have to go back and do the flow diagrams later. But there's a ridiculous number of loudspeakers in this room. And they're in the auditorium as well as over the stage. If you look at a view from the back of the room, you can see this whole row of electronic acoustics loudspeakers. Now when you get towards the back, because the height is so limited, we have to use a much larger number of loudspeakers to spread the sound and have it be natural. So as you move towards the front, as you go row to row, there aren't as many devices, and that's, by design. So this allows us in this room to taper the sound where this rake seating area, the main floor, and the entire auditorium can be tuned to sound much more homogeneous and much more consistent from front to back with acoustic ensembles as well as with amplified ensembles. There's a series of presets for choral, jazz ensemble, other types of music that allow them to adjust the system as required. Microphones here in the front of the auditorium, up in this ceiling section, they pick up the sound from the proscenium. That is the sound that's heading out towards the audience, and then they reproduce it through a series of loudspeakers processed as we've talked about before. Now over the stage, we also included stage shell capability. So there's a whole series of little tiny loudspeakers that are embedded in the stage rigging that can simulate the sound of one of those big reflector shells you see in a lot of buildings, but without getting in the way of their performances. Now the microphones for this are over the stage on some elaborate shock mounts, and you can see some other images here. The microphones here, should be another row upstage. And then a whole series of small loudspeakers that are also attached in the rigging. Now these can be taken down entirely if they want to do a show where they want to use every batten. So every one is labeled and the cabling is designated in a way that they can remove these microphones and loudspeakers, get them back exactly where they were from the original tuning, and not lose anything in the process. As with all the other systems, this runs back through mic preamplifiers into a series of digital processors and individual amplifiers that drive all of these loudspeakers. So every single speaker in the room is getting a different signal. And that's what allows you to do things like steer the sound. Now you'll notice in this room, there are no sidewall elements, and that was partially architectural and partially financial. We got to a point where we had so much money involved in lighting, we had to kind of limit what we did. But these speakers on the perimeter, with all of the usual steering tricks that are available in modern technology, can generate very convincing lateral reflections into the room. And we have the ability to change the reverb time of the room upwards by 2.5 times and to extend the bass response of the room. So this auditorium, which they'd had for years, now has been replaced by an auditorium which is really 5 or 6 different auditoriums acoustically, and it also gives them an incredible amount of functionality. Some of the things over the stage, this is one of the little mini loudspeakers that is used for stage show applications. You see the cabling harness here, and on the back side there's a numbering system so people can get them back where they belong. And then out in the front of house, we combined the rigging for the loudspeakers, house lighting, emergency lighting, and all sorts of other things with a nice unistrut system that kind of just neatened up everything. So Baldwinsville is extremely happy with this auditorium. It's been reviewed by a lot of people, and the performance of it rivals all sorts of other much larger venues that have a lot more height and a lot more acoustic treatments. But it also gave them some really fantastic lighting. And I want to point out too, this back of the catwalk, you'll notice, is masked in. And this was done so that on the audience side, you don't see all of the hardware. Yep, you can see the masking curtains. These are removable. If they want to take them down, they can, but it hides the backside of the lighting radiation of all of these fixtures from the audience. So anyway, that's kind of close out Electronic Acoustics in terms of project examples. The next thing we're going to have is going to be a discussion of the one negative of Electronic Acoustics, which is what we'll get into in the next segment.